Good morning, friends. Happy hump day. I am Krystal Ball.
And I'm Saagar and Enjeti.
Whole lot to get to. We got two big progressive stars coming on the show to talk about impeachment, news of the day, progressive policy, so that's going to be interesting. What are you looking at, Saagar?
Well, it's a great day for Indian Americans here on Rising, so I'm excited for
I'm always excited about that. All that and more coming up today.
Good morning, everybody. So, Krystal, what is on your radar today?
So I'm looking at some of the election results from last night and wondering if they may be a bit of a canary in the coal mine. Allow me to explain and stop me if you've heard this one. So a few years back, a brash businessman comes out of nowhere to run for office, and even though the establishment all backs his opponent, he manages to win the primary, shocking everyone. But then they say there's no way that this guy can win the general election. There's another establishment-backed candidate who everybody thinks is going to cruise to victory. Little did they know, come November, even though the polls had his opponent up and all the pundits were saying this guy is toast, once again, he manages to pull off the big victory. I'm talking, of course, about Matt Bevin, who is the Republican governor of Kentucky. And a lot of people, that was 2015, so it was just the year before Donald Trump was elected, a lot of people saw him as sort of the Trump before Trump. And in fact, he governed in a very Trumpy way. Even though the economy was good, he focused on these very controversial issues. He really took after the press. He had a number of personal corruption scandals. And what's interesting is, now it's re-election time, and last night was the gubernatorial primary. He had a basically protest candidate running against him, and the protest candidate managed to win 30-plus counties. Let's put up the tweet so we can see the map. This is a local reporter in Kentucky who says that looks like Robert Goforth beat Matt Bevin in 31 counties. Most of them were in coal country, actually, a couple in other parts of the state. Coal country being not only a stronghold for Republicans in the state of Kentucky, but of course for President Trump. And by the way, Matt Bevin not only has governed like Trump, but he has tied himself very closely to the president. The president tweeted out his support yesterday morning, saying to the great people of Kentucky, please go out and vote for Matt Bevin today. Very important. He has done a fantastic job for you and America, #MAGA. So I'm just wondering if maybe this is a little bit of a warning sign. Of course, you don't want to overplay this too much. Kentucky is not the country. Matt Bevin is not Donald Trump. But a lot of people saw Matt Bevin's initial election in the state of Kentucky as kind of a precursor, a canary in the coal mine that led the very following year to Donald Trump's election. And now we have a pretty shocking result here, where again, an incumbent Republican governor in a very red state had trouble winning against a guy who no one knew who he was. He was a protest candidate. He barely got 50% of the Republican vote. So pretty interesting and pretty shocking last night. And I would say, look, it's obviously red state in terms of November, the Democrats' chance. You would have to say that Republicans have the edge, but I think Democrats actually have a shot here at picking up the gubernatorial, the governor's mansion in Kentucky.
So, Krystal, you know more about this than I do. So what is it that Matt Bevin has done that has made him so unpopular that he would barely win his own primary?
I mean, a big part of his tenure has been, there's been a raucous teachers movement, right? And he's gone very aggressively against sort of teachers' pensions, and in a very Trumpy way, he's also been very personally insulting of teachers themselves. So he's made a lot of controversial comments there, and that's led to a big backlash for him. And then, like I said, he also has had some of these personal corruption scandals. But the feeling was kind of like, oh, he's kind of untouchable. You know, same with Trump. Like, and nobody seems to really care about this stuff. Well, turns out maybe they care more than we thought.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It's like you said, we shouldn't read too much into the national implications of this, especially in gubernatorial elections. I mean, I didn't even know about this teachers thing that is probably what sunk him in the end. But it is an interesting glimpse into these state-by-state races, which have huge implications for the Republican Party.
Yeah, and especially, again, that it was coal country.
Right.
Which, I mean, those counties that just voted against Bevin, those are some of the strongest Trump counties in the country. And for him to be tweeting his support of Bevin on the day where they basically said, no, we don't know who this other guy is, but we're going that way, I think it's interesting.
I think there's a lot more, it gives me more faith in people who support Trump, because there's this ridiculous notion that he's like a cult of personality and they slavishly follow him.
Yeah.
It's like, no, people vote in their interests. When Trump was aligned with their interests, yes, they support him to the hilt. But if Matt Bevin, like you're saying, is betraying some of the reasons why why he was popular in the first place, then they were like, no thanks.
Yeah. Another note here: the teachers' movement is pretty powerful. Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, what I'm looking at is the ongoing battle with China. And so it's a Cold War 2.0 that is just beginning. Now, the stakes are not as high. Berlin is not up for grabs. It is not it's not the end of World War II, and Europe is not splitting apart. But Huawei is just the beginning. Now, Huawei, if we'll remember, is the Chinese telecommunications company that President Trump targeted in a new executive order for sanctions. Basically, Huawei masquerades as a private Chinese telecommunications company. It's actually controlled, according to our own intelligence agencies, by the Chinese government and used to surveil the people who use its phones. Unfortunately, 1/3 of European phones are currently manufactured in China, leaving them massively vulnerable to these security concerns. But now, President Trump is reportedly considering, according to the New York Times, targeting the Chinese surveillance company Hikvision. Now, Hikvision is the largest surveillance company in the world. And what it currently does is it uses the surveillance state and the surveillance technology with American semiconductors and with American technology to lock up millions of Uyghur Muslims in the western states of China. So many United States companies and so much U.S. technology is complicit in the mass incarceration, some people are even calling them concentration camps, of Muslims in western China, while we allow them complete and utter freedom into our markets. What this is leading to is that we have to decide how we want to deal with China. Should we compromise, or should we cut ourselves off as we did during the Cold War and bifurcate our economies, recognizing that this is an evil state that has no interests that are aligned with ours? And what that really means is that we need to develop a new world order. Since the 1980s, we decided that if we could try and integrate China into the world economy, that they would miraculously become better. We gave them most favored nation trading status in Congress. We let them into the IMF, into the World Bank. We treat them as a developing nation. They have, over and over again, they have used the World Trade Organization. They have used internationally agreed upon rules to cheat the system, to steal American jobs, and to undercut our own domestic market for their own future. We have to recognize that the free trading system, that the free and international liberal world order that we set up, that so many people died to protect, is being exploited by the Chinese left and right. They're so honest about it.
They basically, I mean, they've played us for fools.
Yes.
That's what's happened, is we're like, we're going to follow the rules, and they're like, that's nice.
Right.
We're going to do whatever we're going to do to make sure that we accomplish our goals in the world. I think that comment that Joe Biden made, do you remember, what did he say exactly?
He said, oh, you know, the idea that China's going to take us to the cleaners, that's ridiculous.
I think that may be the single most damning thing that he has said. I mean, if he does become the Democratic nominee, that is going to come back to bite him big time, because that is not the way that most of the country feels, especially in those industrial Midwestern states that Democrats have to be able to win back. You play that on the loop, and they're going to look at Joe Biden and go, you don't get it.
You don't need a master's in international relations or a PhD or whatever to understand quite simply that in the WTO, in the World Trade Organization, that the Chinese just lie and cheat. They depress their currency, they masquerade, or they transship steel. I mean, they will literally do anything to cheat us on the world stage. And we have this entire free trade ideology that's built up here in Washington, conveniently also funded by many people from China, that is built around the idea of free markets, free people. Sure, if both markets are free. Right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think, look, I mean, it's not that people understand all of the ins and outs of what China's doing and how it relates to us, et cetera, but they know the way that their community has changed, the way that they've been hollowed out, and they know who the real culprit is.
Yes.
So I think from a political perspective, Democrats Joe Biden in particular, because I think a lot of Democrats are right on this issue. I mean, we have an interview coming up later with Ro Khanna. He certainly understands the threats and what's going on there. But if Joe Biden is the nominee, he needs to have somebody sit down with him and explain that what is going on, that we've got to take a hard look at China.
He even called people who are in the Chinese government, quote, good folks, the same good folks who are locking up millions of Muslims. So
yeah, no, not so much. Next up on Rising, as we just mentioned, California Congressman Ro Khanna is going to explain how he reconciles his strong progressive values with his role as his legislator for Silicon Valley. Our wide-ranging conversation, that's a really interesting one, coming up next.
And later, with 2020 on the horizon, Democrats are making a comeback in a game that has only possibly 30 seconds left on the clock. The Intercept's D.C. bureau chief Ryan Grimm says it sometimes feels that way. He elaborates when Rising continues.